Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Planning Commission podcast. Today's episode, Back to School with James Braswell, editorial director with Planetizen. The Planning Commission podcast is a discussion you never even knew you needed. Sit back, join us for a conversation between a couple of old friends and their guests to talk about all the things that are happening in this wide-ranging profession called planning. Our views are our own and don't reflect those of any national planning organizations or any particular public agencies and only belong to us. So read your commission packet, know your Robert's rules, and enjoy this, the Planning Commission podcast. All right, commissioners, let's get this episode underway. So as a reminder, let's go through our agenda, our discussion item, whiskey pairing, and our interview with James. This is going to be a fun episode. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
So moved. No,
All
I got
right.
it. So moved.
Second.
Both of them. All right. I like it. Okay. With that, we'll get this underway. Before we get to our question, though, we need to introduce somebody. So joining us and for this episode is Alexander Monjar. Alexander, first of all, thank you for joining us, and tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
So I am currently a project manager for the Urban Renewal Agency in the city of Boise. And my background before that was managing the ULI Idaho District Council of Urban Land Institute. Prior to that, I had worked for the Idaho Smart Growth chapter here. And I don't have an academic background in planning, but it's always been something that's intrigued me since kind of college and then moving into my profession and realizing that our cities and planning is something that I think affects like everything. It's my theory of everything. So I'm excited to be with you guys today.
Well, thank you for joining us. And where your background is actually unique is you're a doer. It's not just about the academic background. You're actually delivering projects from that planning perspective and seeing them to implementation. And we know that oftentimes in our planning profession, that's something that is missing, right? We talk about all the plans, and unfortunately not everybody gets to see those things actually come about. So we thank you for stepping in. All right, so commissioners, I'm going to start this episode off with a question. The question is this: we're going to explore great planning schools. We're going to explore coast to coast what makes a good planning school, talk all about Planetizen's annual their manual and their findings about what they found with respect to good planning schools and what makes them, where the trends are, and so forth. But if you were starting off your own school, oh man, you get to be dean, provost. I lose track of what all those responsibilities are, but regardless, you get to start your own. What is one thing that would set your own program apart? What would you do differently than either the school that you went to, or just even, things that are of interest or things that you think would sort of really resonate with today's potential planning student? Any thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I got to say for today's episode, I wore my alma mater in the University of Illinois at Chicago in urban planning. So I still have that shirt left over from 20 some odd.
That's a really
years ago.
inspired design, by the way. I mean, look how,
Yeah.
wow. Well, look at, they actually chose a font and everything for those of you who are watching.
Yes.
I got a coffee mug that cost me $26,000 around here somewhere. So, anyway.
Go Flames, rah, rah, rah.
There you go.
I guess I would do two things. Going off of the Ronald Reagan theory is bunk statement, I would first either get rid of planning theory classes, or, as I've found, take the planning theory classes at the end after you've all learned about some applications and what's going on, to then come back and see how it fits the theory. And that makes it much more tangible.
I like that one. I had planning theory 1, and then year 2 was planning theory 2. And like a revisit to plan. I'm like, oh my gosh, it drew. I did not like the second go around with that, man. I kind of got the first one, but second go around, that's a whole other story. But Alexander, you're kind of on the outside looking in a little bit, but you've again got that sort of hardcore on the ground, you're getting after it and implementing things. What are some of the lessons that you've learned maybe in your career that you think prospective students might be able to glean from you?
I think the interdisciplinary nature of like planning and development is something that's always been really interesting. And I think the personal element is like a key factor, getting projects through a process, like engaging with people, communication skills, and even like almost like change management or systems thinking as we go into like looking at the broader picture of things and how we're handling them from the private side and the public side, and like how those two come together. Because I work on like public-private partnerships, and so the intersection of those and like the way that our goals overlap with each other, but also like compete with each other, and how we manage that. I would want a planning school that really digs into that.
I think that's an incredibly valuable point that I think, and maybe I'm wrong, but Dawn, you tell me too about your impressions here. I know for me, I don't think we got a lot of sentiment from the private sector. I think it was mostly public sector based. This is how the government structure of planning works, why it should be, the case and so forth. And that case was strong and we needed that. But I think to Alexander's case, to be made here is that, well, in many cases, it's the private sector that implements the plans. If it's not a public backed project, it's that code, it's that plan that is followed by the private sector, and getting their take on things, right, should be something we ought to learn from. And how do we make it better? What are the practical realities that maybe we're missing? That sounds like a great thing, a great tenet of a future program. Don, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, for several years, I did adjunct work in the public affairs program at Western Carolina University, which is my undergraduate alma mater. And it was a planning class because when a public administration program that was putting a lot of students into like these one-person planning shops. And I had met a guy that worked for a local developer, but he used to be on the Federal Reserve Board of the Bank of Charlotte, Federal Reserve Bank of Charlotte. And he dealt with all that financing and all those issues. And I would have him come in and do a guest lecture just to give them that side of it, because even if they didn't go into planning, they were going to be going into the public sector side and be hit with some of those things and needing to know that. And I just think we had a project interview yesterday for a downtown master plan. And on our team specifically is Shellen Rodriguez, one of our former guests here. And she's a developer. She's a small scale developer. She does housing. And I see her as the checks and balance to those of us on the planning side going through that process to offer that perspective, because we can vomit all the planning theory we want all over something like that. If it doesn't pencil out for the developer and what they need to have happen, we're not going to have the success, and they aren't going to have the success.
You know what I would do? And this comes from, I guess, being on the commission here with the city. I think a class should be formed around a handful of actual applications. Imagine a class where you get to see the application from its infancy, right off when it the bat. Here's where it's filed. You get to see it morph through the discussions with the city planning staff and maybe the director if it gets to that point, and then follow it, attend a planning and zoning commission meeting, and then ultimately, if it goes to city council, watch as it changes. Understand the evolution of a project and all of how it's affected from where it starts to where it ends, the public sentiment of it. How does the public relate to it? How does a neighborhood, and I mean, imagine following something that actually is real and seeing how that thing changes, because that's a huge piece of the planning process, right? It's not just create the plan, it's okay, now watch the baby getting born and participate in that process.
Oh, and here's the variance, and here's the appeal.
Yeah, right.
And here's the request for reconsideration. And
right. Watch the public servant, so to speak, of a commissioner potentially break to public pressure, right? And you kind of question, well, how could they do that? Well, if you're in the chambers and you feel that hostility, let me tell you, man, that's not always easy to just kind of ignore, right? There's real world implications there. So yeah, okay, good question. I think good discussion, sets us up well. Before we do, Don, what's our whiskey pairing? What's that looking like?
So talking about the top planning schools, I'm going with a combination here. I'm going with vodka and Monster Energy drink together. So where you're cramming for that exam, you're trying to put that final paper together. That's what you're going to be doing in graduate school. And by the way, this Monster Energy Ultra Peachy Keen, put that in iced tea. Dang good. It's almost right up there with the Crown Royal Peach whiskey.
Okay, before we move
These
farther,
students must be coming like directly from undergrad. Like, if you're,
I have known you for the better part of 2 decades. I have never seen you purchase any energy drink whatsoever. And the fact that you have that and are now apparently consuming that reveals something new about my best friend that I did not know. You're opening it now. He's gonna start. Are you gonna? I'm not gonna shotgun it too, are you?
No,
I mean, I guess that would be appropriate.
No.
All
That
right.
that didn't happen too much in this t-shirt either way back when, but
Vodka and a Monster Energy drink. All right. I think that's probably appropriate. I don't know if our guests would agree, but we'll see in just a minute. But before we do get to our fantastic guest, a name that you have heard on this podcast before, we have an announcement to make. It's one that's been coming about for quite some time. It's now official. And give me a minute to explain. The Planning Commission podcast is pleased, yes, we are, to announce our partnership with Island Press and to share their powerful list of books and authors with our audience, from Jan Gell and Jeff Speck to Veronica Davis, M. Nolan Gray, who has been on our show, and Shalonda Baker. Island Press publishes the top voices in planning, housing, transportation, energy, activism, and environmental and social justice. Their books inform the most significant sustainability efforts, I'm messing that up, apologize, while cementing these thought leaders' work as foundational resources for practitioners. With almost 4 decades of publishing experience, this nonprofit organization communicates information that is essential for solving global and local environmental challenges. Island Press's emphasis is and will continue to be on transforming objective information into understanding and action. Look forward to hearing from their authors in season 3. Island Press is an entity that we are so thrilled to be in partnership with, and you're going to hear a lot from them coming up next season. We have got, let me tell you, as a partnership, we get a sneak peek. And Don, I know Don has seen this. We've gotten a chance to see some of the books that are forthcoming in the coming quarters and throughout this year and next. They've got some fantastic things coming up, and we are so just super excited that we're going to have an opportunity to interview some of the very folks who wrote these great books. So thank you very much. We can't thank you enough, Island Press, for joining this little venture. Anything on that, Don?
No, I think, like you said, there's a list, and you can even go online and see their seasonal preview of books coming up in this particular field. And certainly, if you see an interested topic that you want to maybe have us try to get the guest on for, send it our way. And definitely between both that and with our guest today, James, with Planetizen, and they've been a great partner as well, that you've definitely been hearing our promotion of them and the discount you can get on courses. So kind of the triumvirate maybe of podcast, publication, and online resources for all things planning. That's definitely overselling ourselves amongst that group.
That's a great word, by the way. I'm playing some Scrabble this coming weekend probably, so I'm gonna hit that one back.
Triumvirate. Yeah, there we go.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, what is that scoring? Golly. All right. So as a reminder to our guests, hit up our website, www.theplanningcommissionpodcast.com. Head over to YouTube, Apple, and Amazon, all the other ways. Give us a like and subscribe. And as a reminder, as Don just mentioned, head over to our phenomenal partner, Planetizen, go to courses.planetedison.com/PC10 for your discount code just for listening to this podcast. Now, without further ado, a name you have heard in the past, but something has changed about this man. What has changed? This man studied. He studied hard and he took an exam called AICP and he passed. James Braswell. James, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having us back on, and congratulations about Island Press, and thanks for the promotion of our courses platform. And yeah, Island Press has been a great partner for us also, and their books make our list of top books in planning every year. So and really nice people over there too, which helps a lot. But they just consistently have books coming out every year that really drive the planning discussion on the critical topics. So yeah, congratulations on that.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. So Jade, before we jump too far in, give us a chance to catch up with you. What has been going on in your world? What's going on with Planetizen world? And we'll get into your fantastic review in just a minute, but share with our listeners what's happening with you and Planetizen.
Yeah, thanks. A lot of big stuff. I mean, we've been working hard on the Planetizen Guide to Graduate Urban Planning Programs. This is the 7th edition. While we're recording this, we're going to publish next week. We just announced pre-sale. Probably by the time this hits the air, you'll be able to buy that book online and in digital and print. We also hired a new instructor for our AICP exam prep class. His name's Jeff Levine. He's a former planning director of Portland, Maine, and a town in Massachusetts. I think it's Brookline. Sorry to the Massachusetts residents that I'm offending right there, but Jeff is also a lecturer at MIT and just wrote a book on leadership and planning that was published by Routledge that is actually cited by the APA as a resource for the AICP exam. So we're really excited about helping people prepare for that exam also. And then I took the AICP exam. I think the last time we talked about me taking the exam, obviously a critical and somewhat controversial step, but I was really happy to gain the knowledge that I learned. I do feel a better understanding of all the pressures on the institutions of planning to represent so many different voices and to really lead through these contentious political issues, some of which you already mentioned. And it's not an easy task for any planner or for an institution at the center of the field to provide leadership on some of these really tough issues that straddle, really complicated political dynamics, from, individualism to social good. It can be really hard to find the right way forward through those things, but planning is a field that's absolutely at the center of those issues all the time.
That's a really great lead into our first question is, with these unprecedented times and changes, what makes a good planning grad school in 2023? Yeah,
so that is a really subjective question, and I think the answer really depends on every individual student. I mean, I do have more to say about this, but really the overriding message about what makes a good planning program is that the fit is going to be different for every student. So the challenge, if you're exploring continuing your education in the field of planning and going on to advance your career in planning, is to find the program that matches for you, for your interests, for your skills, for where you want to improve, and for your personality. These programs really tailor to different kinds of personalities. And while you're exploring these programs, it's going to be up to you to figure out where those matches work. But that all being said, we did survey previous purchasers of the guide, both the 5th and 6th edition. We sent a survey out. We heard from over 200 people that had bought the guide previously, and we asked them what they thought were the important features of a planning program. And I can tell you the results of that survey. The very most important outcome that they're seeking, that potential students are seeking, is post-program employment. So, it's a practical decision. It's a financial investment. And people very much want to know that they're going to be secure and stable once they're done making that investment. Followed by program accreditation. So people do want legitimacy. And then we also heard reputation from past students, reputation from professionals, and financial aid availability. So that's a very practical list. One thing you don't see on that list in terms of what students valued most when they were looking for a program is the opinion of other educators, which that kind of problematizes this the mythos that surrounds academics, that only the most pedigreed schools can help you get ahead, and that if you go to the right school, everything's going to be fine. Well, it actually turns out that a much more pragmatic path is what most students are seeking.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I think where I went, University of Illinois, Chicago, was very much experiential and pragmatic, and just people I then interacted with as they got out of college that maybe went to some of these higher pedigreed ones. Going back to my initial part, they were much more grounded in theory than I would say that. Not that it's either one's wrong or right, but yes, they are different. So you guys are in your 7th edition of this. What's different in 2023 than it was a decade ago? What are the emerging trends you're seeing in how schools deliver their curriculum, meet student needs, post-pandemic technology?
Yeah, so we expected, I would say, more change than we actually discovered, and we delayed the publication of the 7th edition for the pandemic, recognizing the upheaval and the uncertainty that was surrounding education at the time, especially university and graduate level education. So I really expected to see more change, and we did see some change, but I think that we also saw programs had really settled back into their routines. There are a few schools that have launched online programs, both in the years leading up to the pandemic and subsequently. 3 of the biggest planning programs in the country have fully online programs that run separate and sort of parallel to their normal master's programs. That's the University of Southern California, the University of Florida, and the University of Washington. A lot of other schools also have the option to study online. And we did notice that more schools are promoting the ability to study at night. I think, so that, and to tailor their course load for their professional career to take as much time as they need to balance their career and earning that graduate degree. There's been a few other themes that we've seen emerge from the presentation that these programs give in the book. We do see a lot more talk about environmental risk, about resilience for environmental risk. We see a lot more talk about social justice, and we do see much more mention of labs that take place in the field. I'm just forgetting the word right now. But you do see more programs selling their specific curriculum based on a learn by doing format, and by getting a chance for these young planners to be out in the community, working with the community to create plans.
Oh man, I love that. I don't know of any planners who got a professional job because they knew Lewis Mumford. Okay, that's cool. But I recall for me, going out in, oh my gosh, I'll never forget this. And when going out to Central Washington to the Grand Coulee Corridor, and if anybody knows it, it's one of these things that's massive in scale that very few people know about it. It's this massive canyon that was just scrubbed out over and over again by a huge glacial lake that was forming in Montana as a result of the last ice age. And it happened over and over again, and all of it just flooded all the way out to the Pacific Ocean. So here we were developing, sort of interpretive panels and signage for these hiking paths and trails at the base of this canyon for people who were coming as part of a parks plan. And so we're in the midst of this, and I'm just going, this is great. This is awesome, right? Like, this is what I want to do. This is a passion, as opposed to being in the classroom and again, I hate to keep hitting on theory, but, name a couple of other real parochial things about planning school. But just to know that those signs got made and people read them, and our work actually to this day, they probably have a few bullet holes in them. It is Central Washington after all, but at least they made good target practice. So there you go. James, I'm going to ask you this. Did anything in your research show or indicate any changes with the students themselves, in the sense of, are students getting a little bit older? Do we have, more families or leaders of families, households? Are people who are working in the field somehow? I mean, is the image of a grad school planning student shifting over time in any way that you've seen?
I haven't broken down the analysis of the actual data, and we do have a mountain of data that we've collected. It would be possible to figure out if some of these programs have become more diverse over the years, and if the total student populations have become more diverse. I know that we also include some front matter in the guide that includes student interviews. And so we'll interview current students, and we try to, sort of cross section with a bunch of, characteristics of programs, small programs, big programs, geographic area, stuff like that. And I can say that having, curated and conducted these interviews now for 4 editions in my time at Planetizen, that it is much easier to source a more diverse population of planning students. And I think programs usually recommend these students to us for us to recommend to interview. And it does seem more apparent that the programs themselves recognize diversity as one of the strengths of their program. And they're much more willing to promote their program based on their diversity. I would say that's probably the key thing that I've noticed in recent years. And I think that responds to a lot of what's going on with the world, a lot of pressure on academics and the field of planning to be more representative of the actual population living in this country and on this continent. So I do think that there's an awareness of these new schools, post-Eurocentric thinking for planning, where you're talking about Latino urbanism, you're talking about Black Lives Matter and social justice in these new ways. And I think that's pretty apparent.
That's really cool to see that responding to like real world, what people are interested in. In addition to like incorporating those types of topics, what advice would you give to a dean or provost to a planning school that is maybe struggling and could raise its profile?
Yeah, so I think this is a tough question. Obviously, we're publishing this guide to help promote planning, the study of planning. We're trying to grow the field and improve the field, but there's this stark demographic reality that I'm not sure all of these programs or the graduate education institute, industry in general has accepted yet, which is we just passed through the largest generation in world history, and every generation that follows is going to be significantly smaller until something happens, until something changes. So you're never going to have the level of demand that you've had for your program that you've had in the last 10 years. That's never happening again.
Wow.
You have to accept that. And that's the stark reality. So you're going to have to do more to promote your program. You're going to have to deliver more in the ways that the public is asking you to. And you're going to probably have to make some changes to adjust to smaller class sizes. And that's just science. There's no escaping demography. And the millennials, having aged out of the prime educational years of their generation's lives, means that everything's going to be different moving forward.
Now that makes me feel old that the millennials have aged out of the educational life. I have in my mind that they're the young ones at this point. Oh no, maybe I was behind on the vodka and Monster drink.
Apparently the young kids aren't drinking as much as previous generations either.
It's the older ones that are having to get through this stuff on a day-to-day basis that are resorting to this.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to follow up with you and I don't know if it's a comment or question, but holy cow, what you just said is incredibly important and profound, but it shouldn't be profound, right? And that is that demographics, understanding demographics is so important to what we do in every piece of not just planning, but as you're a planner, economic development. We don't talk about economic development and planning as much as maybe we ought to. I know there's this sort of subcategory of an industry that is all about that, right? And they come from a different world, but it is incredibly important for planners to understand economy. And if you don't understand demographics, you will never understand economy, right? And not to go too big, but people don't understand China is shrinking and India is passing them globally, right? That's a big, big, big deal when that's the second largest economy in the world. And so I'm just wondering if there's any follow-up on that demographic thing, because what you just said is so important. And is that something that's emphasized? I understand that what you're talking about is the actual demographics of our own country in terms of enrollment at school, but the study of demographics in the planning, grad schools themselves, somewhere in there's a question, but maybe a response from you.
Yeah, you do see some discussion about the decreasing size of class cohorts in like the university, the Chronicle of Higher Education, and you'll see some of this in mainstream national publications too. But in recent conversations I've had with the ACSP, which is it's like the APA for planning professors, they were really looking for new ways to mitigate the decline of enrollment at their programs. They are aware of it. I'm not sure what they're doing yet in response. And I do think that there are some programs, however, so this is sort of changing the subject, but answering your question. I do think that there are programs that are more aware of the effects of demographics on.
I would hope planning schools
trends.
would be. That would
just locally here, Dowell Myers is a professor at the University of Southern California, and he's been a big influence on the way I think about this. He makes a really compelling case for the importance of immigration, especially Latino immigration, to the strength of local economies. This racial group tends to be underappreciated, to say the least, for their contributions to the economic health of the country and states like California.
We did some demographic modeling just on a county here west of Boise that's historically had a large seasonal worker population. And Chris's whole point is like from the Hispanic side is this is your future workforce and you need to start preparing for that. And then I'm reminded of some work down at Fresno State a few years ago where a lot of first generation students from families that had immigrated to the Central Valley were there. And I could see the same kind of thing happening in planning schools. So as we start to jump into kind of going over the top 10 and what this means, if I go out and get this guide, what type of information am I going to find about each school?
Yeah, and I do need to make a note to reference back to your point about Fresno State there, and I'll try to do that. If I don't, please remind me to bring something up. But yeah, so the guide is 428 pages, something like that long. We have a front matter section that includes the student and professional interviews that I mentioned earlier. We really have a diversity in both those groups. The professionals that we interviewed this time around are from all over the country, all sorts of different jobs. We were super happy to interview Angela Brooks, the current president of the APA, who's an affordable housing advocate and developer in the city of Chicago. She's one of our marquee interviews this time. We also, for the first time ever, acquired we're able to publish. We partnered with some academics who did data scraping of our jobs board back to 2012, I think. And so they analyzed every single job posting that we've had on the Planetizen job board, thousands of job postings since then, and detected trends and reported those trends about, what states are hiring, what kind of jobs are hiring, what kind of skills overlap for job postings. This is becoming a more common academic research area, and this is the first kind of publication of research like this for the field of planning. So that's been published in this guide. And then we also have a long section. Most of the book is dedicated to program profiles for each of the nearly 100 graduate programs in the United States. About 69 to 70 of those programs provided us with a full response to a survey modeled on the Planning Accreditation Board survey that they use to decide whether or not to accredit programs. So 69 or 70 of those programs have 5 or 6 pages detailing, faculty demographics, student demographics, financial aid information, enrollment, internship opportunities, study abroad opportunities. It's a huge detail. One of my planning friends here in LA told me that when she was considering where to study, she printed out all of the pages for all the programs she was interested in and did a sort of a side-by-side comparison. And then we have the rankings, which is sort of a middle section, and we do have a top 25. We also have an educator's opinion survey that we do and we report the top 25 in terms of the education opinion survey. That educator's opinion does inform the final 25 also. We also have rankings that break down by region, and by a few other areas like largest programs, small programs. We also do by suburban location, big city, small city, stuff like that. We're really trying to get as many schools represented as possible, but also break down these rankings into more bite-sized and more approachable standards that make sense for people as they explore their possibilities. Okay, and what I wanted to say is,
oh yes, Fresno
yeah,
State.
as my final point is, the rankings aren't perfect. They are. I'm sure that you've heard about other ranking systems being sort of protested, and even some big schools withdrawing from the law school rankings. The design intelligence rankings for architecture programs has been recently canceled, and we do our best to respond to all those things, but I do think we don't necessarily capture some of what you're talking about, where first generation students can go there and really get ahead in a way that, maybe a more pedigreed school isn't an option, or it doesn't function in the same way. So, I used to work at Cal Poly Pomona, another California State University, very similar to Fresno State, where you have a lot of first generation programs. I would rank Cal Poly Pomona first. It's first in my heart, right? But it doesn't show up on the rankings. And I think that's one reason for students, when you're considering where to go, to really take these rankings with a grain of salt, because the right program for you is going to match on different standards than what we were able to capture with this data that we've collected over the last year. So do you want to talk about the top 10?
Yeah.
Well,
I was gonna say, you're talking about all these things why we should maybe, grain of salt, but everyone is gonna ask, what are the schools in the top 10? We'll work our way.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not trying to drive this bus, so
I guess we'll do like the David Letterman drum roll for that. So number 10 school, we can start with that one. And I can tell you that for a long time, this school's mascot has been Jumbo the elephant. Jumbo the elephant, and is the reason why we have the word jumbo used in this country, because that's a word from Swahili meaning large. So number 10 is...
Was that in the guide?
Yeah, no.
Revision.
There's still time. Oh, you want me to say it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, sorry, number 10 is Tufts University.
Tufts University, Jumbo the elephant. Any specifics on Tufts and that program? That's in the Boston area. It's a private school.
Yep.
It's very much a legacy school, especially in that whole vibe of the Boston, Cambridge with Harvard in them.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm trying to figure out if the enrollment is small, but yes, a Boston area school. I think that that's what you're getting. They did also show up on our rankings as the top program without a PhD program. So I think that some of the top programs in the university, in the masters, and we're really talking about masters programs, do sort of take some of the shine from their PhD programs. So Tufts was the top program that doesn't actually have, and it was also, that doesn't also have a PhD program, and it was also the 4th highest ranked program that allows part-time study.
Oh, cool.
Lovely. Awesome.
Yeah.
Number 9.
Number 9, I'm navigating back
Big
and forth
school.
between
It's a
lists.
really, it's probably one of the largest enrollments in the entire country. And you got to definitely know how to manipulate those 2 fingers, because you're going to be doing it a lot at this school. Is it down or up? I forgot.
It's
I
down
think
if you don't like them.
Oh, okay. There we go.
That's the University of Texas at Austin.
University of Tech. That's like a 50,000 person enrollment, I think, if I'm not mistaken. It's a big school. Oh,
Yeah, and they are also the 3rd ranked school in the South, which we included Texas in the South, even though that's, not necessarily the same definition that everybody would use. But actually, Texas is not in the top 10 of largest programs by enrollment. So there are a lot of big, big schools. I totally agree with you.
While the school is big itself, the program.
Yeah, the planning program, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
I used to joke with Texas. They're like, Texas, when they want to be the South, they'll be the South. When Texas wants to be the West, they want to be the West, but mostly they just want to be Texas and let you know that.
That's true. That's true.
That's right.
Their own thing. All right. Go ahead. Number 8. What do we got?
Number 8 is the University of Southern California, which is right here in my backyard in LA. I can promise you that did not influence the rankings in any way. Being a public school kid, that went to Berkeley, USC is a classic rival. But, I can also say that living in Los Angeles, which is one of the most interesting places to study and practice planning, I think, in the world. And I think most people would acknowledge that, for better or worse. That USC is constantly at the forefront of planning discussions with a number of their faculty. They have had some problems with university leadership, but in terms of the Masters of Planning program, they're doing a great job of preparing a lot of the highest ranking planners in LA and in both sectors went to USC.
Excellent.
And if you've ever been to a football game for USC, the hardest working band and cheerleader corps in college.
They only play one song.
They only play one song. The band, but they never shut up. They never shut up.
True.
This is the song that, Okay, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
7.
Yeah, we're at Harvard. And one of the things that I learned in producing this guide over the years, I would have expected Harvard maybe to be higher. And this goes to show you that planning is not the same as the U.S. World News and Report and the same system as the undergraduate level. But, Harvard University does a lot of great planning work. Their Joint Center for Housing Studies is absolutely one of the most important and influential research institutions in planning in the country. I think that probably it's just out of reach for some people for studies, but Harvard, I think sort of overcomes maybe its reputation at the undergraduate level in terms of its contribution at the graduate level in planning.
And another Boston area. Yeah, number 6.
Yeah, that's right. Number 6 is the Georgia Institute of Technology. And that's in Atlanta. So, and it's not actually the top ranked school in the South. That is yet to come. But, Atlanta is an incredible place to study planning, really one of the fastest growing regions. And really, actually, Atlanta is not that large of a city by itself. But when you take the region into account, massive, and it's growing incredibly quickly. So Georgia Institute of Technology, if you're interested in this kind of setting, a growing region, it's hard to recommend any school above Georgia Institute of Technology. And I was thinking of Professor Emeritus Bruce Stiftel, when you guys were talking about theory, because he loves theory, but he's also deeply embedded in environmental study and the intersection with planning. But I just had to give a shout out to Bruce in case he was listening while you guys were bad mouthing theory.
So here's the hard part to reconcile with Georgia Tech. One, I'm a Georgia Bulldog fan, but two, if I'm a planner and I have to sit there and sing a fight song that says I'm the rambling wreck from Georgia Tech and a hell of an engineer, that's the water and oil side of that. Now I'll say that despite the cynicism, I think Georgia Tech, from producing engineers that get at the things in transportation I know that we look for, is one of the better schools out there. And a shout out to Matt Magnasco, Georgia Tech grad at Charlotte DOT, who is absolutely wonderful. So Alexandra, of these bottom 5 of the top 10, which one would you rather go to? Now, you're not the one with the formal planning background. Which one sounds best?
Ooh, prospective planning student, top 6 through 10.
Top 6. Ooh, I think probably Southern California.
Basking
going
in
to the
sun.
sunshine.
Yep, place.
And although it hasn't been sunny here since, I don't know, October. Hopefully tomorrow.
I think we also just got you another criteria for next year's guide, and that is if anybody's fight song has planner in it as opposed to engineer.
Awesome.
Guessing that's probably very few, but nevertheless. All right, let's go number 5 and number 4. What do you got?
Number 5 is the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and this is the top rate program in the South, another very fast growing region. One thing that I've heard multiple times from UNC grads is that they're focused on training planners for management roles. And that's one thing, a theme that we see sort of emerge with some of these programs, where they're making a distinction really between the nitty gritty and the heavy lifting of the field and the management. And, so GIS or reading, plans or plats, that's sort of a separate area in the field of planning from management or more vision setting or long-term planning stuff. And we've heard from graduates, and really UNC presents themselves in this way also, as being more focused on the longer term in your career and the higher levels of the profession.
All right, number 4. You know this.
Yeah, number 4 is my alma mater, the University of California at Berkeley. I did not study planning at Berkeley, but Berkeley actually dropped from 2 this from the previous book. And this is a good time to bring up that the difference between these top 10 is actually pretty small. I keep providing this caveat. But these are all great programs, and the distinction between 1 and 10 is quite small, and you should choose the one that fits best for you.
Right.
So Berkeley falling from 2 to 4 is not necessarily an indication of them doing anything wrong. It's just the way it worked out this time. I can say Berkeley is a fabulous place to live. They also do amazing research on housing. Obviously, the Bay Area is the hotbed of the housing affordability crisis. And they have several. The Turner Center for Housing is an absolutely critical location for studying, both the inputs and the outputs of the housing crisis. And they have they have some eviction research that they do there that just that's non-parallel.
Yeah. A little ironic, given that the Berkeley area was one of the first zoning cities in America.
And they wrote the racism into the law for their exclusionary zoning ordinance. So, but they are taking very tangible steps. The City Council in Berkeley in the last couple of years to undo some of that legacy.
Yeah. All right, our top 3. What do we got?
So at number 3, we got Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey. I think probably people might be surprised to hear about Rutgers being this highly ranked. New Jersey, I think in general, is an underappreciated state for its beauty and its proximity to just a variety of urban and suburban areas. New Jersey is sort of central to the history of 20th century development patterns. And they also have several lovely research institutions that are major influences in the field of planning. And I think and this is people might also, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I thought Rutgers maybe was a private school, but it's public too.
It was for a long time. I think the state
okay.
purchased it because they didn't have one. New Jersey too, the first planned industrial city in the US with Patterson, and actually Alexander Hamilton
right.
planning that. That didn't get mentioned in the musical. I know Chris would love to go to New Brunswick to eat their local icon sandwich called the Fat Sandwich. That's a combination of burger, cheesesteak, gyro, bacon, eggs, and you put an appetizer of like fried mozzarella sticks, chicken fingers, or fries in it, wrap it all in one and go to town.
Wow.
So their public health school has a lot to study.
and get your blood drawn the next day. Yeah, there you go. All right, Rutgers. Now we got our last two. Oh man, we have an opening at number 2 because Berkeley slipped. So who filled that void?
Yeah, and this is really where maybe the shocker is. We're gonna see a shakeup in the top 2 ranks this time for the first time. As far as I know, ever in our guide, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology is ranked number 2 and not number 1. And I can't really say exactly why. We can't reveal too much about our methodology because we don't want these programs to game the system. We do provide an overview of the methodology in the guide.
Great point.
I can tell you that MIT also didn't do anything wrong. The top ranked program, this has been building for a while, and I will say that MIT is still has the highest reputation among educators. They have an incredibly dynamic faculty. If you're interested in the same thing that the MIT faculty is interested in, you can't really do better than studying with these people. And they also have a variety of think tanks and research groups and design groups that are working at the absolute cutting edge of the profession.
Perfect. And maybe you can use that as negotiating power. You're a graduate student, you're going there, hey, you dropped from 1 to 2. Can we get the tuition down to like 54,000 a year instead of 55? Maybe that's a ploy.
All right, James, pressure's on. Did Planetizen nail it this year with their number 1 selection? And it's a familiar name. It's been on the list in years past, but now it takes the torch at number 1. And that school is
the University of California, Los Angeles.
UCLA. There we go.
And UCLA is also the largest program in the country. I think we try to mitigate the effects of having a large program, but it does really reflect having a lot of resources to offer your students. You have a large faculty, which means they can study a lot of different things. At UCLA, you also have some faculty that disagree on some of the fundamental issues. There's a very serious debate between faculty members at UCLA about the effects of zoning. And you have some traditional NIMBY, single family oriented professors there. You also have some people that oppose development for gentrification purposes. And you also have some leading NIMBYs on their, pro-development researchers on the faculty at UCLA.
And you also major in those things? Can you concentrate in NIMBYism or YIMBYism?
I don't know about that. I don't think you could concentrate in NIMBYism, but there is one professor there named Michael Storper that you might want to explore if that's one of your interests. But they do a lot of great research on evictions. They're one of the leading voices for the communitarian concerns of planning, which I think is absolutely essential. They also have Donald Shoup, who I know has been on the, everybody should know, and has been on the podcast before, right?
Yep.
And some other leading professors in the transportation sector. Their transportation institute there is a leader in the world. And again, LA is an interesting place to study planning. And some of that is because they're working so hard, and we are all working so hard to overcome some of the mistakes we made in the last century and export it around the world. So, and UCLA has also just been killing it in fundraising. They've been attracting donations. That's part of the reason they can afford all these resources and the large faculty, is because they just they consistently over the past decade have been bringing in large donations from the public to help fund that school specifically.
All those planners that got rich in the public sector.
Okay. Yeah. Right. All right. Well, there you have it. Not only the top 10, I mean, that's a part of this guide, but obviously a tremendous amount of work and research and interviews has gone into it. 400 plus pages, Planetizen's Guide to Graduate Urban Planning Programs. The 7th edition is coming out soon, and you certainly can go to their website, www.planetizen.com, in the next, actually, by the time this airs, it'll be out.
Yep.
So there you go.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you very much, James. James Braswell, thank you very much for joining us, and all of the hard work to you and your colleagues at Planetizen.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
All right, Commission. Not only is this episode wrapping, this season is wrapping with this episode. This is our 20th episode of season 2, and a lot of things will be coming out in our season number 3 in probably a couple of months from now. First and foremost, Alexandra, thanks for hopping in. We appreciate you substituting for today's episode. Appreciate your time with the Planning Commission podcast.
Thank you.
All right.
It's awesome to learn more about the schools.
Yeah, for sure.
Might
for
buy
sure.
that guide, you know?
Yeah, for sure. All right, Dawn, this is a wrap. We need to thank a handful of folks. First of all, we want to thank Planetizen, of course, for being our partner with season 2 and moving ahead. Our new partner, Island Press. I'm super excited about that. Lots of things to come. We need to thank Jess Smith, who was a part of this venture for the first couple of years. We certainly appreciate all of her hard work and efforts as part of this show. To all of our guests who have been on this show the last several months, we've had a lot of good ones. Donald Shoup, as you just mentioned, James, and many others. It's been a heck of a 20 episodes. I can't believe we're now, 40 something episodes into this. Don, did I miss anybody?
Well, I think behind the scenes, my fiance,
Yes.
Melissa, that does all the
you.
website and social media stuff, as well as the other guest hosts we've had, Tara Crawford, especially Lauren Driscoll, Mark Fenton, standing in a good roster there. So I think we've had a ton of fun and learned a lot more this year and more to come. And so with that, I think I'll set a motion forward to both adjourn the episode and season 2.
There we go. I'll second that one, as long as it's unanimous with Alexandra. So to our audience, www.theplanningcommissionpodcast.com. Hit us up. We appreciate all of the things that you've been doing. And with that, season 2 is in the can. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you soon. Hey, everybody. Commissioner Danley here. Would you like to see more? Hear more? Well, we got you covered. Go to our website, www.theplanningcommissionpodcast.com. It's got everything you want. Guests, yep, past episodes, video, the audio, even our whiskey pairing, links to everything about all the people we've had on, books, websites, you name it. It's unbelievable. You want to reach out to us? Please. We'd be more than happy to chat. You can email us, planningcommissionpodcast@gmail.com. You want to tweet at us? Go for it, @planningcommish. We're also on YouTube with the Planning Commission Podcast channel, Facebook. Heck, send us a carrier pigeon if you need to. We'd love to hear from you about ideas, guests, you name it. Thank you for listening. We appreciate it. We'll keep doing our thing. You keep doing yours. Have a good one.